I'm laughing to myself already because we're late again. So I just want to put on the record. Oh, Younes has bloody disappeared now. We've been having tech gremlins because we've been trying to get Younes's microphone to work, and we haven't been able to. And we did actually. I was here, by the way. It's normally me, right? I will hold my hands up
I
and
was
say
here
it's
as well.
normally me.
Let me just say I was here too. All right.
Alex was too busy saying he agreed with the Pope on his latest comments, and Younes has been fanning about with his new microphone that doesn't bloody work for some reason. But anyway, we were 13 minutes late, so I do apologise, but we are here now. All's well that ends well.
Slightly improving. 1 hour the first time, half an hour the second, 13 minutes this time.
Not bad, eh? Not bad, not bad. Right, everyone's joining in, so thank you very much to all of those who are here. And I'd like to thank everyone as well, because there is a Sky News debate between the Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak. So the Prime Minister, I've just made Sir Keir Starmer the Prime Minister early.
Well, you might as well do.
Yes, I have. Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are going head to head on Sky News. And people aren't watching that and are instead watching us. So thank you very much for that. I think that kicks off at past. So if there's a drop off, we'll know why. But I'm sure you wouldn't leave this for that boring bloody malarkey.
Boring.
Always Pooh says, Alex, you were very good on GB News yesterday. And Adi says, I'm not leaving because it's far too early to fall asleep. So, yeah, I agree. I agree. Now, and Always Pooh's commenting on Rishi Sunak's comment on how he has no Sky TV as a child. Yeah, my heart bleeds. Now, I actually did have Sky TV for a little bit. We loved it. It was like sort of aspirational to have Sky TV. Did you have Sky TV?
My mum had one of those TVs you used to pay into. You had to put money into the actual meter on the TV. So one day, my mum, we were quite poor. And one day the TV got taken away, and my mum said it was going away for repairs, and it never came back.
Oh no!
So Sky TV was a little bit out of reach for us, unfortunately. But,
I don't remember. Like I've never seen tellies where you put money into them.
I'd love to know if anyone in the comments has had a TV like that in their life. But yeah, they were metered TV boxes.
My nana has a meter where you have to actually pay to, and plug in. You pay in the shop and then plug in because she doesn't trust direct debits. But I've never heard of a television.
I love the oldies. Disfaith in the system. It's great.
Oh, absolutely, it is great.
How does that work? You put money in it inside the TV, or you have to put it in somewhere else? So you can just basically.
I can't remember. It was some sort of rental. I can't remember. I can't remember. But yes, that we had one of those. I was quite young, so I can't exactly remember. My mum always used to lie about it.
Tony on Facebook says we had a TV like that. I'm showing my age. Well, the problem is that Alex is showing his age, and I think Tony is older. I don't mean any disrespect to Tony, but I assume Tony's older than you.
Yeah, I think it was a hand-me-down, I'm sure of it. It was a hand-me-down rental.
Well, Verity on Twitter says, I remember the telly with the money slot, but you are too young, Alex. So, it must be...
Well, hopefully... I think that might show how poor we actually were at the time, but that was as good as it got for us when I was a kid.
Yeah, you win the working class competition today.
Rishi Sunak won the working class because he doesn't have a Sky TV, but he went to a private school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they couldn't afford it. Yeah. Right. I want to start by showing viewers this lovely video if they haven't seen them. It gave me great heart and great cheer. Of course, the European elections were predicted to have declared an overwhelming swing to the right, and that came true. But despite the fact that it was predicted, I think it's fair to say that a few of the liberal left were less, I think, they were less willing to accept that the polls could be correct because, of course, we would never vote against our liberal betters like Emmanuel Macron. And they did in France. And these are a few voters gathered for Macron's party. And this was their reaction.
Consultation prévue à l'article 12 de notre Constitution. J'ai décidé de vous redonner le choix de notre vie. Je dissous donc la consultation prévue.
It just gets better, the three. Oh, every time Le Pen's party wins big. I mean, this is seismic. But then you had the European Commission, the president of the European Commission, who is standing for, I was about to say she's standing for re-election. It's not actually a democratically elected system. It has to have the vote of the members of the European Union. But she said this in response.
EPP is the strongest political group in the European Parliament. EPP has the most leaders. Together with others, we will build a bastion against the extremes from the left and from the right. EPP is the strongest.
So the EPP is still the biggest bloc in the European Parliament, and Ursula von der Leyen there saying we will build a bastion against the extremes from left and right. And I said, so she's basically saying, the people got it wrong. We are still the biggest bloc in Parliament. We don't have to deal with those right-wing horrible people that have been elected. We have to actually remove them from the discussion altogether. And I said the EU will never change. Democracy cannot change it because it isn't one. And I stand by that. And then the other thing, just before I bring you all in, Sinn Féin in Ireland, and we've covered it on this stream week in, week out, Ireland has been going through its own mass migration moment, and Sinn Féin are the ones who are saying, come one, come all, it'll all be tickety-boo. And the Irish people are saying, well, I was going to vote for you, but you can think again, Mary Lou McDonald, if you actually think that we're going to vote for you now, if you are pro-mass migration into Ireland. And they actually were punished in the local elections and the European elections. And I was absolutely delighted. But I wonder if the two of you have any thoughts on Europe's shift to the right, and also some reflections on the way in which, especially in Germany with the Alternative for Deutschland and France with Marine Le Pen's party, that actually the youth vote came out for people like Jordan Bardella, who is the leader, president of the Marine Le Pen's party. And actually that is a seismic moment, showing that the young people aren't swinging to the right. And I wonder, do you think this is down to mass migration basically blighting the future of young people? Alex, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, it's like, I think you hit the nail on the head, Darren. Young people are seeing the effects of this firsthand themselves. I mean, a lot of young people are the victims of stabbings, are victims of the sort of influx of immigrants, not being able to get jobs, wages lower, not being able to afford their rents. There are some of the people that really are impacted by all these things that we're talking about now across Europe. Now, interestingly, Reform is the second most popular party amongst young people in the country. It's insane. So, I mean, of course, Labour is still by far that's right. It's still by far the highest, but that's an incredible statistic to see that a party that's only a couple of years old is becoming increasingly popular with young people. Now, of course, the Labour vote there is super strong, and that will always be the case amongst young people. But I think, particularly across Europe, and we saw what happened with Marine Le Pen in France, and how many young people just showed up at her event was incredible. Jordan Bardella? Is it Bardella?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, he is extremely popular. He's got millions of followers on TikTok. And I think this is going to be a trend that continues into the future. So, while the centrists refuse to do anything and to change their approach, they're only going to encourage the right more, the real right, not this pretend sort of wet left right that we've got with the Tories and other parts of so-called conservative parties across Europe. But the real right will shine through and get more votes.
Yeah, Younes, I mean, we've seen actually that in this country, as you can see in that poll there, 50% of young people voting for the Labour Party. And the Labour Party, of course, are going to do very well out of this upcoming election. Do you think actually, do you find it somewhat depressing that Europe is moving to the right whilst Britain is moving to the left? I mean, the Tories are to blame for that, aren't they?
Yeah, but I don't actually think UK is moving to the left. The only reason why Labour is winning is because of the consecutive failures of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before on this show, there was a new study done that actually a lot of young people, especially boys, high school boys and college students, they're swinging to the right. And the reason is that there's a scientific reason behind this. Like usually people are more liberal and left leaning when they are young, and people become more and more conservative as they get older. So unfortunately, like I was a left wing guy when I came out of university, and I was a socialist. But as I got older and older, I became more and more capitalistic. And again, this is another pushback against the globalist agenda and against the wokey agenda. I was watching this gentleman called Professor Matt Goodwin, I think his name is.
Yeah.
And he was saying that the left always tries to paint the other side. Oh, you're crazy, you're racist. No, we're not racist. We just want strong borders, or we don't want the woke stuff shoved down our throats, or we just want common sense policy. And I think the right has now become, there is no such thing as left and the right. There's the globalist and the establishment, and there is the common sense parties, and Reform is a part of that. And lastly, I just want to say that Reform is actually the most engaged party on social media in terms of retention and the likes that they get, because a lot of the people that actually comment on my posts, they like vote Reform or join Reform. So I actually think some of these posts could be wrong, because how can the Reform Party be the biggest party on TikTok, the biggest party on TikTok, which is predominantly under 21-year-olds? They are the biggest party on TikTok, and yet this poll says 50% were voting Labour. I just think that the Reform Party will have a lot of votes, but unfortunately, they will end up finishing second in a lot of constituencies. They'll get
That's
a lot
really
big share
interesting.
of
Yeah.
they'll get a big share of the popular votes, but they will not manage to get a lot of MPs in.
Yeah.
But I'll predict they will get between 5 to 10 in the parliament.
Wow.
On that second place, that which they're going to be in a vast amount of seats across the country, they're going to be second place in Labour seats. This is the incredible statistic.
Yeah.
And it shows to people, it really shows, and I hope it teaches the Tories a massive lesson, which they've betrayed the public. I doubt they'll get the support back again. But, those Labour seats, those working class seats, those are the people that naturally like Nigel Farage. They want the working class to be revived. And they know that Labour doesn't really stand up for them. They know that Labour doesn't represent the working class. It represents the elite. If anything, it's the intelligentsia that Labour represents. They don't have anything working class about them other than the odd MP like Angela Rayner, who comes across as working class. But all this wokeness, working class people are the people of common sense. So they see all this nonsense, like all this woke rubbish, and they go, well, why are you endorsing that? Aren't you meant to be the party of common sense and working people? Because working people don't want this shoved down their throats. So I think you're right there, Younes. They will come second place in a lot of red wall seats. And that's what Nigel Farage has been saying too.
And Adam on Facebook says the first past the post system, the electoral system that we have in this country, is designed to keep the two main parties in power. Fair representation is needed. I think there is a real argument, and there will be a real cry for electoral reform after this election. If reform only get perhaps a couple of seats, but they get millions of votes, how is that fair? How is that right? And do we need to even the playing field and have a more European-style system? Yes, even I am willing to say that the Europeans get some things right. But on that point of we mentioned the words far right there, and some of the people in the comments are mentioning it already as well. And Sky News said this the other day, that they were talking about the surge of the far right in the context of the European elections. And they said the surge of the far right with a picture, a piece of video of Nigel Farage with a pint. And I said this is a seriously unforgivable smear by Sly News. Ofcom will, of course, shrug their liberal shoulders, and I stand by that. And then you said, Alex, on Twitter that the left have gone so far left that everything is right or far right to them. You know, science or biological truth, that's far right. Countries having border controls, well, that's far right. I even heard, Alex, that actually locking people up in jail is considered far right now if they've committed a crime. Freedom of speech is far right. Wanting lower taxes is far right. Questioning the government is far right. Country having a right to defend itself, well, that's far right. Capitalism, you know, lifting people out of poverty, that's far right. All of these things are far right. And then, like clockwork, Dawn Butler, a Labour MP, she tweeted, "We were all warned about the rise of the far right and incels." I don't know where incels came from, but I've heard this a few times, but I can't really get my head around it. Now, the attack on woke feeds into this dangerous rhetoric. The surge in support for the far right across Europe is a warning for us all. Farage and Reform and some Tories should be nowhere near power. And I said, actually, far right means you believe in borders. Racist means you reject anti-white bigotry. Transphobic means you accept biological sex. Islamophobic means you say no to religious sectarianism. The left has utterly debased the English language and every single ism and phobia in the English dictionary. And then with that all in mind, right, these smears and this penchant for the use of the word far right. Yesterday, a member, an activist for Younes and the Union, from Chesterfield, and he looks like the sort of Jeremy Corbyn voting great unwashed, but he was basically he threw whatever it was, some form of missile from a construction work bin at Nigel Farage aboard his battle bus. And I had said that I said, I know it's something that Nigel's spoken about, and he says he puts it to the back of his mind because he doesn't want to think about it. But I said, I think Sly News branding him far right and Guardian columnists like Owen Jones saying that it's art to throw things at him, and MPs actually refusing to call it out in the same way that they would, dare I say, if it was Diane Abbott or Sadiq Khan who was having construction work thrown at him. And I said, if it was anyone else, this would be front page news. But there are two questions from that, I think, Younes. I'll start with you. The fact that the far-right smear, the left using this as a smear, and the attack on Farage, do you think that that's linked? And do you hold those people partly responsible, actually, for stoking up this resentment and this hatred directed towards Nigel Farage?
Yes, so 2 points I'm going to make on that. The first point is that, of course, the mainstream media tries to paint Nigel Farage as a far-right person, so that way they can smear him, and that way they can make him and all his followers look like racists. And that's because they can't win on the issues. And that's the same thing, as I said, they do to Trump. They can't win on the issues, so they go after you in terms of character and character assassination. And then you have certain impressionable, uneducated people that take that seriously, and they throw milkshakes at him and they throw stones at him, and God knows what else can happen in the future. The second thing I want to say about this is that in the past, if you know the political spectrum, we have the left and the right, and then we have the libertarian and the authoritarian, right? And traditionally, it was more the conservatives that were more authoritarian, meaning that they wanted to impose control. They didn't really want freedom of speech. They didn't really want freedom of expression. So I am actually an old school liberal. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in freedom of expression. These are liberal values. And now I feel like it's switched a bit, where the right is more libertarian and the left is more authoritarian. So it's went from this to this, right? And any party and it's the globalist side, it's the left that tries to cancel you, it's the left that tries to force the vaccine, it's the left that tries to shove down the woke stuff down your throat. So they're extremely authoritarian in that aspect. They might be socialists, but they're extremely authoritarian. And in my heart, I'm a libertarian. And that's maybe one of the reasons I was more on the left in the past, is that They were the ones that were more libertarian. Now that's changed. So, as I said, I feel like the left and the right doesn't make sense anymore. I really think it's the establishment and the mainstream media and the populists and the libertarians.
Yeah. Alex, a couple of comments here. Chris says, racist, fascist, Nazi, bigot, they've all been overused until they've lost their real meaning, which is dangerous, actually, because if you, we should actually be worried about there being genuine Nazis, right? And then having nothing to actually call them because the words have been so thoroughly debased. And then Steve says, yet it's the far left that are the most violent.
Yeah, well, those comments are absolutely spot on, aren't they? The term far right is used as a term of slander towards anybody that the establishment and the left disagree with. It's used to basically call you a Nazi without calling you a Nazi. Let's just be clear about the way that they use it and what their intentions are. Their intentions are to make you seem unelectable, to make you seem dangerous. But as Steve has just said, who are the ones who are being violent? You know, in France, there were, after Marine Le Pen's election, in the villages that voted for her, there were people out there rioting and burning down parts and trashing the streets of those Le Pen voting areas. There were attacks on the AfD in Germany. There was the AfD politician was stabbed. That, you know, Nigel Farage has stuff thrown at him. Who are the far right? Who are the people who are dangerous? Let's just have a look at the evidence, the facts. And of course, we all know the left and the far left, as I like to call them now, don't like facts. They bury their head in the sand. They pretend that the facts don't exist. And that's because the facts don't serve them well at all. I have not seen a single piece of evidence to tell me that any of the parties that have been voted for in Europe have had any violent history at all in modern times. You know, reform, people voting reform are just average British people who've had enough, that don't want to vote Conservative or Labour anymore because they offer no change. And they know that. They lie to you. Those parties lie to your face every election. They promise you to reduce migration. They promise to bring down your bills. And they all do the opposite of that. So, to call ordinary folk far right is an absolute disgrace, and we've got to start calling it out.
Yeah, Bob says the left have rewritten what fascism means and become the new face of fascism. And I think I agree with that. We're going to come back to Nigel Farage because I want to get to what the BBC were. I haven't really spoken about this yet, and I haven't seen much discourse on it, but I was struck by what the BBC were trying to smear Nigel Farage with earlier. But I will get back to that. Let's go to Israel next. And this video I thought was really good on the media's Israeli bias, and actually pretty revealing on the public's, well, lack of understanding of conflicts that are much more brutal than anything the IDF has done in Gaza. Let's have a listen.
I'm Zach H. Fox, and welcome to No Jews, No News. All eyes on this. What is the biggest thing in the news you've heard about recently?
Gaza.
Palestine and Israel.
Palestine.
This is a list of displaced people in different conflicts happening right now. Palestine is number 14.
Wow.
What? Have you heard about any of the 13 conflicts above that?
No, tell me about it.
Houthis have about 250,000 slaves. How many people have been killed in other recent conflicts? 5.5 million in Congo, 500,000 in Syria, 500,000 in Sudan. In Gaza, about 20,000 people have died, many of which are terrorists. Do you think it could be because when there's no Jews, there's no news? Jews, okay. Why do you think so much focus is on that? When Israel, its civilian to combat ratio is 1-to-1 there, where in these other places, people are dying by the millions.
I think it's news stations choosing what they want to talk about.
Could be that they don't like Jews.
Absolutely.
Did you repost the All Eyes on Rock thing? Did you know there's no mountains in that area?
That's insane.
Or snow?
I did.
You didn't know that?
No, I did not.
Why is this one tiny little state the size of New Jersey getting more attention than
anyone else? Right. I'm not informed.
But you reposted the Rafa thing?
Yeah.
On behalf of the Ayatollah, Supreme Leader, thanks you for your post.
He just educated us on a lot of things.
What's happening in Gaza is absolutely heartbreaking, but it's also Hamas's fault and largely being fueled by anti-Semitism. If you're only putting your eyes on the Jews, you may be fueling it.
So I thought that was a good video, and I appreciate that man with the guitar saying that at the end. And obviously this comes after Israel rescued 4 hostages, and people like Owen Jones were sort of kicking off that Israel dared to rescue the hostages and people died as a consequence. It's almost like if Hamas hold people hostage and the nation state that wants to get its people back comes in, like you're at risk of getting killed. Like who could have possibly guessed that would happen? And it was really brave footage, and you saw the IDF in there. 1 man died in the IDF, and they rescued 4 of those hostages, which I would expect Britain to do if that ever happened to the United Kingdom. And I wonder, Younes, do you see this bias where actually there are all these conflicts in which hundreds of thousands of people have died? The Uyghur Muslims, millions interned in camps in China, and of course Syria, and all these other, the Houthi rebels, what they're doing in Yemen. All of these things spell out a picture of a world that has a lot of conflict. Yet the only conflict that the media are willing to focus on is Israel-Palestine. Why is that?
Well, because it's actually a very smart move by Russia, China, and Iran, because they want this to happen. And as the gentleman said, more like 500,000 people died in Yemen in the war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And that's Muslims killing other Muslims. Bashar al-Assad killed more than 1 million Muslims, 1 million of his own citizens.
Yeah.
And there's also a genocide going on in Congo. I spoke about this on Talk TV the other day. And I think there was a mixture of things because this conflict has been going on for so long. And this conflict is not just between the Jews and the Muslims. There is a side of it, but it's almost the battle between Islamism and the East and West. And that's why it gets so much traction. It's almost like an extension of America and Europe and the front line of democracy, which is Israel, and then the front line of Islamism, terrorism, which is Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis. And we have a lot of impressionable young people, or just impressionable people in general, which haven't lived in the Middle East. I have lived in the Middle East. I was born and bred in an Islamic country. And they taught us to hate Israel.
Yeah.
Like we had to chant death to Israel, death to America in primary school. Can you imagine? And can you imagine how much more extreme that is in Hamas and in Palestine? How much more they hate the Jews? And we just have, young impressionable people. They think they're doing the right thing. They think, oh my God, look at the Palestinian kids. I feel so sorry for them. But they don't realize that actually they're helping Iran. They're helping the Islamists. The Ayatollahs and China and Russia, they're laughing at us because of these impressionable kids. And again, it goes back to we failed to educate our youth. We failed to tell them. And again, it goes back to that whole woke mentality. Because we had the woke stuff for the last 10, 15, 20 years, people have lost their critical thinking, and they think that somehow Israel has something to gain, or they're Zionists, they're committing genocide and they're doing apartheid. What has Israel got to gain by committing genocide? And let me be clear, Israel has nuclear bombs. They have a military capability. They can literally turn Gaza into rubble in less than an hour if they really wanted to. And there's also 1 million Arab Muslims that live in Israel. So if they're committing genocide, they've got to be the worst at committing genocide. And again, mainstream media also. Mainstream media doesn't really report on these things. Congo, Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, all these things. All they do is put all their focus on Gaza. And everything you see on your feed is about that. Why is that? Why is the mainstream media not focusing on all these other conflicts? What happened to Russia, Ukraine? That was the frontline news. More people have died in Ukraine than they have died in Gaza by a lot. I feel like the last figure I saw was 230,000 people have died in that war, almost 250,000. No attention.
No. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the slogan there, Alex, was no Jews, no news. Do you think there is a special focus reserved for the Jewish people who, of course, are residing in Israel?
Yeah, well, we know that Islamists hate the Jews. You know, they won't say it out loud on the streets, or sometimes they do actually on these marches, but we do know that Islamists hate the Jews. We know that the state of Israel amongst those Islamists and amongst the left is deeply hated for many, many reasons. A lot of them feel like it shouldn't exist at all. We saw that data that came out of the poll of British Muslims recently, and I think it was an astonishing amount of them, over 60% said that Israel shouldn't exist as a state. So this is deeply embedded amongst Islamic people who are brought up in Islamic households. I'm not saying it's every household, but there certainly is a great deal of them that don't like the Jews, and therefore this conflict with Israel is seen as a religious type of war, not a just war, which it is. They're seeing and framing it as a religious war, a war against Muslims, not a war against a terror organization. And I don't think these people were so vocal when we bombed Iraq and we bombed Afghanistan. You know, they were very, very far less vocal. But in this case, they're extremely angry and they're out every weekend. And I think that says something about the society and the upbringing and the ideology that we have to be careful of. You know, Nigel Farage again talks about this quite often. Gets deemed a racist and Islamophobic for saying this stuff. So you know, I think we just need to call a spade a spade. Simple as that.
And on some of the comments, Irina says, "What about Pakistan? What about Pakistan itself kicking out millions of Afghanistan refugees and the killing of Christians in Egypt and Nigeria," which gets precious little coverage, of course, but when it's the Jews, that's fine. Yeah, there are lots of comments on that, lots of action. But the other thing that I thought didn't get any coverage whatsoever by the mainstream media was what happened with branches of Barclays, in which they were thoroughly destroyed, utterly beyond, you know, this is the damage in extremis. And I assume that that's pretty good, strong, thick glass, right? So they've fairly gone at it in order to wreck these branches. And there were several branches that were actually destroyed like this. This one was in Bristol. There was some in London. And it says they're attacked by pro-Palestine activists. Now, I said if it were white skinheads doing this, right, if it was, and they were arm in arm with Tommy Robinson, that the media would be saying that we were in the throes of fascism. This was 1930s Germany, the far right are at it again. But when actually the hard extremist left and Islamists do this, well, it's met with a shrug of the shoulders, barely gets any coverage. Oh, it's only a bank, who cares? Well, actually, no, this is domestic terrorism, I'm afraid. So, I mean, Younes, do you have any reflections on how we actually combat this as a society? Because it's, you know, there are more and more people who are holding these views. Younger Muslims, for example, are becoming more extreme. So how do we actually combat this? How does the West actually get out of this hole that is only getting deeper?
Well, if you want to look at it from a religious perspective, in the Quran, chapter 9, verse 29, it says that kill Christians and Jews when you find them, and if you don't kill them, you have to charge them the jizya, which is more taxation. So there's actually a call to action to kill Jews and Christians or charge them more tax in the Quran. Okay, so they're not making these things up. And the problem is that we are not allowed, or historically people were not allowed to criticize the Quran, or criticize the life of Muhammad, or criticize the Hadiths, because people were killed for it. Like even to this day, if you criticize certain parts of Islam, you are frowned upon and you're considered an apostate and you should be killed. So that's the religious aspect of it. Then we have the left, the wokey left, that doesn't understand Islam and doesn't understand the dangers of it, and then it supports it in its quest to take over countries from within. Okay, and if you criticize it, they say, "Oh, you're Islamophobic." No, I'm not Islamophobic. I understand. I was taught Arabic as a kid. I read the Quran inside and out, and I read all the hadiths, and I understand Islam thoroughly, and that's why I'm an ex-Muslim, because I understand it too well. You know, but the left doesn't understand it. They think you're racist for criticizing it, and then they jump on the bandwagon and they basically help terrorists and Islamists to carry out what they want to carry out instead of saying, no, this has no place in our society. And then we get called far right for saying, no, this is nonsense. And this is factually nonsense. This is factually
Younes,
nonsense.
On Twitter, Adi says it's just like Iran in 1979.
Exactly. And I've mentioned this before. Islamists use, because, the left, they're too weak and they have no principles. So the right are much harder to brainwash. Islamists usually use the left to reach their targets. And as I said, this is exactly what happened in Iran in 1979. The Islamists built a coalition with the neo-Marxists and the lefties, and they went against the Shah, and they won. And when they won, they literally massacred all the neo-Marxists, and they got all the power to themselves.
Well, I mean, pretty scary stuff. But Alex, what are your reflections on that? Because I think what Younes sets out rings true.
Yeah, it does. And, when we're talking specifically here about, this coverage of what happened at that Barclays store there, there's something to be said about the silence of the media. Now, we've noticed this. You can compare this to so many other things that have happened in Britain over the last 2-3 decades. Let's take the Rotherham, for example, where those young girls were groomed and raped and whatever else, which there was not only silence from the media, but silence from the political establishment and the justice in our country as well, the police forces. So there is this, concerted effort to cover up and hide things that are politically distasteful to the establishment. And part of the establishment's agenda is to flood this country with as many people from different countries and religions as possible, for whatever reason, to raise the GDP in their respects, for whatever reason. And therefore, they see the way of doing that as, we can't cause any cultural conflict. We can't have the British public turn against them, so we just shut it up. We'll just pretend it didn't happen. Right? Anything that calls into question the establishment's agenda is shut up. Now, we can also compare it to what's going on at the BBC. There was a very interesting report from GB News this week that showed, I think it was now, that if you are a young white male, you are if you're a male of ethnic BAME, whatever the acronym is, minority, you are twice as likely to get a job than a young white British boy. That is relatively disturbing, given the fact that white men make up a vast majority of this country. And so we see this narrative, this actually institutional racism in reverse, right? It's all these things the left claim to be. So again, you're going to get people like them infiltrating our reporting and our agencies. There we go. And they're the ones who are meant to be telling the news. And of course, if it's flooded with people from ethnic backgrounds who don't like this narrative, by the way, well, we're not going to hear anything about it, are we?
Yeah, because that Telegraph article there, that barely got any coverage either. White men have at least the least chance of getting on the BBC trainee scheme, of being the next generation of BBC journalists, presenters, whatever else. It could even just be, someone working behind the scenes. Applicants coming from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds were 2.5 times more likely to be accepted for the training. So I think that's a good point, Alex, and the right one.
Yeah.
And I think it's so wrong, and it just sows seeds of division, right? It actually, it's like they're actively trying to make people want to have some form of hatred in their heart. And it's racism. That's what it is. It's racism.
And, look, my stepdad's also from Iran. He came over to this country. He came here because it was Britain. And I was talking to him. I was back home this weekend. I was talking to him about what's happening to the country. And he's horrified. He said, there are too many people. There's too many people. He said, I came to Britain because I wanted to be part of British society, British culture, work hard, have a family, and integrate. And he said, what he's noticing is that there are people coming here who are not doing that. He has had as many opportunities as everyone else, and he didn't speak the language when he first came to Britain. He learned everything, did everything he could to integrate as quickly as possible. But he's saying there are people coming here who don't want that, who hate the country, who hate the West, who hate everything we stand for, and will happily watch it be destroyed. And those people, unfortunately, now are infiltrating our institutions. Why can't we have a meritocracy? What is wrong with people getting a job or getting into any sort of organization based on their ability. You can't fight that. You can't argue with it.
And there's a brilliant documentary it came out not too long ago by Martin Durkin, and it's on YouTube. You can seek it out. And Martin talks about the climate change issue, and he actually argues that the money and the policy making actually encourages people not to be meritocratic, but actually to be as far-fetched on the climate science as you possibly can in order to bring about fear and actually get the funding that way. So the whole thing, like whether it be the climate, whether it be DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion, all of these things through taxpayer-funded institutions are having perverse consequences on the British population. The Western world, actually. And Arena says they're trying to divide the nation because a divided nation is an unstable and weak nation. I think that's absolutely correct. But on the theme of the BBC and racism, Nigel Farage was accused of being racist, and I said that the BBC kept attempting to smear, because he was on Laura Kuenssberg's flagship BBC politics show on a Sunday, and he was in the press for saying that Rishi Sunak, after the D-Day debacle, doesn't understand Britain and why so many are so upset. And I said that's got absolutely naff all to do with his skin colour and everything to do with him being entirely out of touch. And the Farage defended the claim and basically, said he told Laura Kuenssberg that the Rishi Sunak was disconnected by class and privilege, not by his skin colour. But on that point, Younes, you are a supporter of reform. Do you think Nigel Farage was racist in his criticism of the Prime Minister?
No, not at all. Rishi Sunak doesn't understand the working class man because he was born into a multi-millionaire family, and for me it's really pathetic that he always tries to come across working class. Oh, I didn't have Sky when I was a kid. Yeah, you went to a private school, yet your parents couldn't afford Sky. It's just really, but at the end of the day, look, you can't choose the family you're born in, right? And I don't really like these politicians that try to come across working class. Even Keir Starmer, he tries to come across working class, but he's not. My dad owned a tool factory. No, he wasn't a tool maker. He owned a tool making factory. Yeah, it's a big difference.
And Keir Starmer's the tool.
Yeah,
the biggest tool made.
Exactly. And look, the thing is, you have to be proud. You say, yeah, I was born into a multi-millionaire family, but that gives me a special perspective on life. I get to do things that normal people can't. And I really do believe that people are not really looking for someone that's like them. They look for someone that they can aspire to be like. I really think that. You don't see Trump going around saying, oh, I'm working class. No, I was born into a multi-millionaire family and then I became a billionaire. Yeah, I can't help it. And I feel like you should celebrate that instead of trying to come across and I don't think it even lands with the voters because the voters know you're lying. And it's virtue signaling. It's just literally virtue signaling. And what it does is that it makes you come across dishonest. It makes you come across like you're lying. And that's, again, goes back to my argument that I made in the past. There's really a deficiency and a lack of a charismatic, honest politician. Okay, and Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, all 99% of politicians fall into that category. Nigel Farage is in that 1% that doesn't fall into that category. And so doesn't Trump and a few other personalities around Europe and around the world. And that's why these people have the public support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Sarah's point, Sarah on YouTube, says they really are getting desperate. And I think that's true. We spoke about the Sky News calling him far right. We've spoken about the BBC there trying to smear him with the racism charge for what he said about Rishi Sunak. I mean, there's no denying the fact that Rishi Sunak is in a very fortunate and privileged position in life, and I don't begrudge him that. I'm certainly not someone that launches into class warfare and all that other nonsense. But I think it is right to say that Rishi Sunak, in his position, does not understand life like someone from Barnsley would, right? It's just, that's just the fact of life. But Angela Rayner was asked about why people are say mean words to her, boo boo, and she said that it was misogyny and classism that explained the attacks on her. And I said, what utter nonsense. And the reason I go on to this is because it leads on nicely from the classism argument. Many of us from Council Estate resent what Rayner stands for too. You know, her hard left politics, warfare, with the class system, globalism, anti-nuclear weapons, which is just insane, pro-Islamist appeasement, you know, those clips where she was sat in that room full of men and she was talking about how she was going to do all she could to be anti-Israel. And I said none of that actually speaks to us, being opposed to Brexit. That didn't speak to us either. But this is what she had to say. And then, Alex, I wonder if you would respond to what she has to say.
Because how much of it do you think you said it was misogyny? How much of it was classism, do you think?
I think there's been quite a bit of classism as well. Yeah, I think misogyny and classism have been very much a theme in, you know, you only have to see the way in which I'm described and you see some of the trolls. You know, I'm used to that, and I'm used to, you know, I'm not a guy from Eton in a smart suit. I'm a girl from a council estate, and I've had to prove my worth, and that's okay. I don't mind proving annually because
why should you not have to prove your worth, right? Everyone should have to prove their worth. I don't see that as and is it not a race to the bottom in suggesting that actually, you know, working class people having to prove themselves is a little bit too difficult, and therefore, you know, let's just abolish the rules and give them some form of, you know, the quota system or something like that in Parliament. This is where this thinking gets us, right? And it goes into that point there about meritocracy. Meritocracy is dying a death in the name of identity politics.
Yeah, let's take the best example, the most successful working class politician in this country, Margaret Thatcher, right? She didn't go around going, I'm the victim of misogyny. I'm the victim of the class system. This is a woman who had to prove herself because she was one of the only females, if not the only, I can't remember what the numbers were, but she was one of the only females in politics, hands down. She actually was a working class person who grew up in a working class family and rose to the top of politics at a time when nobody thought a woman could ever do that. Now, did you see Thatcher complaining about all of that nonsense? Absolutely not. Now, what the left do, and you've nailed that already, Darren, is that they use, I mean, actually, funnily enough, Angela Rayner doesn't have a unique thought to herself because Lewis Goodall, who's the one who's interviewing her before that, the start of that clip, actually says, do you think, Angela, that you're the victim of misogyny and classism? Then she goes, oh, yeah, I am, actually. She doesn't have original thought in her brain, quite frankly, Angela Rayner. So she's just gone, yeah, well, I'm going to be a victim. I'm a victim of the system, and I've had to prove myself. Of course you've had to prove yourself, you idiot. I mean, this is, you're going to be the deputy prime minister. If you don't have to prove yourself and you think you should get in because of your upbringing and the world owes you a favour, then what kind of planet and what kind of country are you going to build? You know, what kind of planet are these people living on? You know, we've all had to work hard. I've come from a working class family, a very poor family. I've had to work hard, but I don't go around wearing a badge on my sleeve that goes, I was a victim of the class system. It's like, I worked hard to get out of poverty and give myself a better life. You know, but that's just what most of us in this country actually have to do. That is the reality for working class people. We have to work. We do have to work a bit harder, yes. But a lot of those MPs haven't just walked in because of their background. A lot of them now are also working class people on the left and on the right. It's nonsense.
Yeah. Younes, any thoughts on that?
Blair without the flair, as Nigel Farage.
Yes, that's a good line.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's funny that, you know, they can attack us and call us far right and throw milkshakes at Nigel Farage, but as soon as we question them, they're like, oh, misogyny, you're so misogyny, you're so sexist. Oh, classism. Oh, you're sexist, you're racist, you're xenophobic, you're Islamophobic. So they can say whatever they want about the right and call us far right, but as soon as we start criticizing them, they go back into that shell of, oh, you cannot criticize us because you're a sexist, you're a racist. And I feel like I'm just really sick of it, you know? And finally, of course, look, I hate people that have a victim mentality. I never had a victim mentality. I saw both sides. When I was back in Iran, I actually come from a very, very good family. Like my great granddad used to come from the Qajar dynasty, which used to be the king of Iran. And then my dad actually ended up going to prison because he was working for the British embassy. And then me and my mom had to come to the UK
Wow.
whilst my mom was still pregnant with my little brother. And when we came to this country, we had to be on benefits. So I saw both sides, and they basically seized all my father's assets, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and he went to jail and he had to put all his assets off. So they basically took all the money from him. And I basically saw both sides. And I'm glad that I saw both sides. There's actually a real character. It builds your character when you have to start from the bottom. And when I was 13 years old, I came to this country. I couldn't speak English at all. And obviously, we didn't have a lot of money. We had to be on benefits. We had social housing. And by the time I was 16, I had 8 GCSEs and I ended up doing well for myself. So it's all a mentality. I hate people with a victimhood mentality that always say, oh, everything is sexist, everything is racist. And I actually think it comes from a place of deep insecurity that they try to, in a way, they try to battle the fabric of reality, or they want the outside world to be in a way that doesn't offend them. That's not how life works. Life is difficult. You have to just crack on. And people with a victim mentality, they don't really get far in life.
Yeah, I remember Margaret Thatcher said she was born into life with two great things, and it was good parents and no money, because no money, you have to damn well work for it. And I thought that was a very good.
And Angela Rayner is the ultimate hypocrite. I mean, I've said this so many times. I mean, this is a woman who has had 2 homes. One of them she bought, which there was a council house.
Right to buy, yeah.
Right to buy, and then she
which she wants to get rid of, by the way.
That's exactly it. She now wants to get rid of everyone else's ability to buy a home. Now she's benefited from the system. It's absolutely ridiculous. And she talks about classism when she wants to stop people from being able to get out of poverty. They have to live in their council house forever and pay the council. It's so nonsensical. It's hard to even formulate a debate against it, because you're like, where do I start?
Hypocrites.
Yeah. They are. That's what they are. One of the comments on YouTube from Anglo-Saxon, who was a super chat, so thank you very much, Anglo-Saxon. They say, Darren, David Lammy going to be Foreign Secretary. I mean, troubling, terrifies me. What are your thoughts? I mean, there's just another example of a man that isn't very clever, but banks on identity politics like you wouldn't believe. And I think we're in for a pretty rude awakening, and I think we're going to be reminded. David Lammy is a man who smeared the name of 17.4 million people in this country by smearing us as Nazis, Brexiteers, tantamount to Nazis. Yeah. I mean, it is grotesque in the extreme to compare those who voted for national sovereignty to be tantamount to those who put Jews into gas chambers and cut off their oxygen supply until they all choked to death and died and were poisoned by this gas. That is just a grotesque way to describe people who used to vote, by the way, for the Labour Party. So in a way, I'm very worried about it, but equally, I'm quite glad, because I think that it'll be a very short honeymoon period where the Labour Party quickly falls apart, and it's exposed by the fact that they've got all these lunatics fresh out the asylum running the damn bloody country. So that's what I would say to that, Anglo-Saxon. Have heart, but it's going to be hell to begin with. But I think we'll expose them eventually in the end. And believe me, I'll be doing my damnness until they put me in the bloody gulag to expose much of what they're doing.
Yeah, and also I'd like to say to the audience as well that the Labour are going to have such a thumping majority, and it's going to be a massive majority, that they're going to start fighting with each other very quickly. The far left, which are a vast majority of the Labour Party, are going to get any opportunity to get Rayner into Downing Street to number 10, which is going to be the greatest gift to the rest of us come the next election. So let's wait and see. I can guarantee you that party is going to tear itself apart really fast.
Yeah. Younes, have you got a dash now?
Give me 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. All right. That allows me to quickly do another topic then. So the other topic I wanted to do was the way in which 50 migrants have been, they were set for Rwanda and they were detained, and they have been freed on bail by lefty lawyer types who have got them out. And of course, Rishi Sunak hasn't left the ECHR, so there's nothing we can do about it. And they're on bail, so they're willy-nilly walking through the streets and all the rest of it, and won't be sent anywhere, despite the fact they entered the country illegally. And then you just juxtapose that with the fact that on the fact that Muslim polling in this country suggests that issues like homosexuality aren't favoured by the Muslims who are in this country. And of course, I assume, if you're coming here from Afghanistan or wherever else, that you're not going to be pretty okay with gay people or women having, all the rights to do whatever it is they want to do, and all these other things, equality for the sexes and for gay people, and dare I say trans as well. But this is the conundrum that the Labour Party find themselves in, is it not, Younes? Because they are trying to marry two coalitions where they are trying to say, we are the party of mass migration, we love migrants, come one, come all, whilst also being the party of LGBT plus alphabet soup equality and advancing progress on these issues. And I said, this is them on July the 5th, 2024. I got a lot of abuse for tweeting this of Sir Keir Starmer in a lovely rainbow burqa. And that coalition is very quickly going to tear apart, right? They are not going to be able to marry up an open border policy and saying, come one, come all. They're opening up these safe and legal routes to migrants from across the world, whilst also saying that they're the party for trans people and all these other things. Because Younes, the Workers' Party, this is a man, he's a very handsome man, called Geordie McIntyre. This is this fella here. And Geordie McIntyre is someone... Oh, I haven't got it on screen. I beg your pardon. This fella here, on the left here, Geordie McIntyre of the Workers' Party, has laboured the trans community a danger to society. The Workers' Party, of course, being George Galloway's party. This was the Muslim polling where 52% of British Muslims want homosexuality to be banned. This was Sir Keir Starmer in his lovely rainbow burqa. I beg your pardon, because I thought I had it all on screen, but I didn't. And the other thing was the penchant for mass migration with the Labour Party. But you see what I mean, what I'm getting at. There is this tension where they are saying that they are going to open up safe and legal routes across other countries to actually stop the boats. And they're going to be the party of mass migration. They're going to be the party of the trans people. They're going to be the party. How do they marry all of these things up? There is going to be an internal conflict inside where you've got people like this Geordie McIntyre handsome chap on the left here who is opposed to trans rights and all these other things. And there's a tension that's going to be borne out pretty quickly into a Labour government, Younes.
Yes, and there's a saying that says, once you stand for nothing, you accept everything. And I think that's exactly what's happened to Labour. They stand for nothing.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at viewer comments. I'm not laughing at you, Younes.
Yeah. And funnily enough, I really identified two dangers for Western civilization and societies in the United Kingdom. One is wokeism, and the other one is Islamism, right? And these are literally two different sides of the coin, but I think they are just as dangerous as each other, right? And what's happening now, because the Labour Party doesn't stand for anything, they literally are the party that tries to bring two opposing sides, two conflicting sides. So the side of Islamism and the side of wokeism together. And they don't realize that that's just a contradiction in terms. You cannot be a party of immigration and Islamism and also be a party of wokeism, because Islam is probably the least woke religion there is. There's not much tolerance in Islam, you know. So yeah, I mean, if there's a last word I wanted to say, once you stand for nothing, you accept everything, and that's exactly what's happened to the Labour Party.
Very
And
wise, very wise.
embarrassing.
Arena says that man, Geordie from the Workers' Party, George Galloway's party, is handsome and has a face that only a mother could love. Chris, by the way, commented saying, "I thought you said handsome." Yes, Chris, I was taking the Michael. I was taking the proverbial. But Alex, what are your thoughts on that? Because it is actually, the left is going to very quickly, that coalition's very quickly going to fall apart, isn't it?
Yeah, we're seeing it happen now. You know, since the one of the great things about this whole Gaza-Israel war has been that it has exposed the deep-rooted problems, as both yourself, Younes, and Darren, and you both have said, that the Labour Party doesn't really know what to do. It can't please. It needs desperately to support Israel because that's the established norms in our society, to support Israel, one of our allies.
And they don't want to look like anti-Semites, of course, as well, after Jeremy Corbyn.
Exactly. Yeah. They don't want to look like anti-Semites, but they rely heavily. You saw Angela Rayner, obviously not that long ago, going to that what looked like a heavily male Muslim meeting. I think it possibly was in a mosque, actually, where she's pandering to them about Gaza and how she'd do something if she could. She said she'd give up her seat if it meant that it would stop the war in Gaza, which I think is a load of rubbish. I don't think she'd give up her seat for anything, not even for a little old lady on a bus, probably. But you know, the Labour Party has got deep-rooted problems. It's gonna have to contend with a lot of those over the next 5 years, and unfortunately for Labour. Well, the good thing is that they're going to get such a thumping majority. The next election, they're going to lose seats. Hopefully they lose enough that they actually do splinter off. But you're going to see demands now from the strong Muslim sect of Labour, once they get into government, to be more radical about Israel, and they aren't going to comply. So we're going to see that Muslim vote in Labour collapse very quickly.
Yeah,
and George Galloway will probably suck up those votes.
Yes, and play on the religious sectarianism element, and that then starts a death spiral. And I don't welcome that. I dread it. But I would say though that the Labour Party pointing and laughing now and rejoicing on July the 5th, 2024, which they no doubt will be. I think it's going to be very short-lived, actually, because I see this falling apart pretty quickly. And I realise that might sound like cheery sort of rose-tinted spectacles. But I am pretty optimistic that will happen. One, because I think that the people that they've got around that cabinet table are nuttier than a fruitcake. And the fact that this coalition just will fall apart. And there will be greater demands on it, to, as you say, Alex, to be more radical. And as you say, Younes, the Islamism threat isn't going to go away, isn't going to dissipate, and is one that's going to just spiral and spiral and spiral. So we need...
The whole thing is based on a lie, because you cannot marry wokeism and Islamism together.
No.
So they're going to ride on the votes, but as soon as they get into power, they say don't lie because it destroys everything. They will realize quickly that the whole thing is a lie, so the whole thing will collapse because there will be infighting.
Yeah.
And on that note, I have to go now.
Yes,
Pleasure to meet you guys.
That's absolutely fine.
I'll see you next week, yeah?
See you. Bye. Right. Well, I think the only other topic, Alex, there was one very quick topic that I wanted to do. Oh, Younes is sort of still there, which is very weird.
He's gone now.
I have just ejected him. Oh, he's called back. Why is he calling back? No, Younes, you've got to go. Goodbye.
You've gone now. It's too late.
Yes, not now. You've said goodbye, Younes. It does say he's ringing again. Did I let him in?
Oh, I don't know. It depends what he's up to.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, well, indeed. I don't want to sort of... Oh, no, now he has actually gone. Right. And the other thing that there was to cover, Alex, was this video that I was really stunned by. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on it, because it relates to the issue of immigration. And it was a viewer, by the way, one of our viewers, who sent this in to me, and he emailed me on my website, on my contact form on my website. Now I'm going to get a load of abuse from people now that I've pointed out this contact form on my website. And there's this bloke who's in the full regalia from the Home Office, right? He's a border enforcement officer. And he was basically saying that British people are looking for someone to blame other than our own when it comes to mass migration. And then went on to say that he's skint and everything's getting more expensive. And I said, well, he's clearly on issues like housing and the NHS, failing to see a link between mass migration, which he's supposed to be there to enforce, and two other things. But actually, the fact of the matter is that throughout many British institutions, Alex, we have people like this in positions of power who are activists in and of themselves. Just have a listen to what he had to say and let me know if you think I'm right on that.
Obviously, it's full of Eastern Europeans and all foreigners and all that, but at the end of the day, obviously with my job, the amount of people that I speak to mainly are Eastern Europeans, and they're the most polite people that you'll ever speak to. To be fair, I have a lot more problem talking to English people. They don't have the same level of respect. I just think they want someone else to blame rather than their own.
So there he is, right? He's an enforcement officer. He's there to enforce the Home Office law. And yet he's, what I would describe as a red under the bed, someone opposed to the Conservative Party's so-called policy of having border controls.
Yeah, these people, I mean, look, they exist. They're a huge part of the problem because they don't want to look at the facts. This is the real issue here with the left, is they don't like dealing with facts. You increase migration, which means you lower wages because we're importing cheap labor. It means that we're not building enough houses, therefore there's a housing shortage. Yeah. And the reality is that a lot of these issues, not everything, but a lot of these issues are being caused because we have uncapped immigration in our country. So if he says everything's getting more expensive and everything's getting worse, we should start by solving the problem. He's just applying what he sees in his day job, which is, foreigners scared of him because they see him in a uniform. They're like, oh, we should be scared of this bloke who looks like a traffic police officer. Let's be nice to him, which probably hate him. And British people who know, right, this bloke hasn't got any authority. Look at the state of him. They're going to tell him what they think. The reality is he doesn't like being told what the reality, more than likely, as well. The foreigners are going to probably be slightly more respectful because they're worried they might be shoved out the country. We all do this when we go on holiday to different countries. We're a little bit more respectful of the local police and the local law enforcement. And he's just applying his own lived experiences and trying to make sense of them. I don't like British people because they're mean to me. I like foreigners better because they treat me with the respect and authority I deserve. Like, these people they're just the biggest load of what's the word? Jobs worse, I think is the word.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, Steve says he couldn't enforce a feather duster. So,
exactly.
And actually, I don't know if anyone is familiar with the work of C.S. Lewis, but he actually reminds me a bit of sort of Mr. Tumnus. He's got that look on him. But right, and then very finally, Alex, because I know this is someone close to both of our hearts. Despite being a lefty, J.K. Rowling, she slammed the BBC's new director of sport, Alex K. Jelski, after he said that tennis star Martina Navratilova, how do I say that? Navratilova, that's it. And Olympic medalist Sharon Davies, which is a much easier name to say, were not experts on trans athletes in female events. Now, I'm just going to take a look at him, and for some reason, he looks like he's got a poodle on his head. Like, what is that?
It's a pot noodle.
It looks like, a pot noodle or something's died on his head. But anyway, this bloke is telling these female athletes at the top, who were at the top of their professions, that they don't know a thing about sex-based rights in sports. And J.K. Rowling hit out at this new BBC director of sport after he allegedly blocked these sports personalities on social media by said they're not experts on trans athletes. She hit out and said that he was pathetic, and that in a 2019 article, this man who took up the top job this month at the BBC, he had claimed that whilst they were important and influential voices on the issues, they were not experts. Now, I would argue that they are experts in this area, actually. And you don't need to be that big an expert to recognise that having biological men in female sports is unfair. But this is what we're contending with, right? This is a director of BBC Sport who we're all forced to pay the salary of, with the threat of prison if we don't. And we're paying for this man to get a really awful dye job on top of his pot noodle. Like, it's just, I find this absurd, but it speaks volumes about the BBC and how out of touch they are, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, look at the state of him. First of all, I can't take anyone who looks like that seriously. I can't. It doesn't matter what they're telling me. I can't look at that man and go, "Oh yeah." I mean, I'll take your word on trans athletes more seriously than I would a woman athlete. I mean, first of all, you're a bloke. Like these trans athletes, you're a bloke. So you shouldn't be having a say in this regardless, if you really respected women in the sport. You know, these are people who have competed. They know. They've lived it. You know, this bloke, who is he? He's just a director at the BBC, probably just as far left as most of them are. So I'm not surprised. I mean, J.K. Rowling is actually, even though she's, you know, would traditionally vote for the Labour Party, I doubt she will be. She's a sort of person that's actually the reform left, in my opinion. She's those people that have come from the Labour Party that go, actually, I'm fed up with this nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, so I think she'd fit quite nicely, although I doubt she'd ever say that out loud. But, you know, it's just bizarre, isn't it? The world we've created, the world that's been created by the Conservatives and Labour over the last 30 years is absolutely bizarre to have this situation play itself out.
It is. And the fact that it's been allowed to take place, right? The fact that, you know, our public broadcaster is allowed to get away with all of this stuff, this nonsense. Yeah. And it is naked activism, right? It's activism running rampant through the institutions. And the cultural... What I want the Conservative Party to do is act as the vanguard in defiance of this stuff, to not allow it to take place. But they have allowed it to run rampant because they want to be seen as centrist and nice and flowery. And, you know, we all make cakes for each other and cuddle, and it's all rainbows and little puppies and poodles, like the poodle that's died on top of that man's head. And
but they're not centrist, Darren. Darren, look, they're not. You know it. They're not centrist.
Oh, I know.
You know that tweet that I put up the other day, which showed where I think the centre ground is now, is far right. You know, the centre ground, the common sense people like most of us probably on this channel are far right now because we don't comply with their message. We don't believe it. We don't believe that men can be women biologically. And we don't believe that they should compete against biological women because they have a competitive advantage biologically. It's facts. It's science. But the BBC won't let you say that. You'd be a fascist. Or far right, both, whatever it is.
Steve says the BBC have killed my favourite show since 1974. I'll let you guess which one. I think Doctor Who was on earlier than 1974, was it? So it's not Doctor Who, is it? But maybe anyway, it could be a whole host of shows because the BBC's bloody ruined everything that was ever good. But I know I said just finally, but I do think this sums up the farce that we're in with the Labour Party, because they have they announced that they would ban under 16s from buying energy drinks, right? And I said, well, hang on a minute, because they're saying to young people, and by the way, I don't necessarily disagree with the policy. I do think there are too many under 16s who are just buying these things and going hell for leather. My little brother, when he was at school, was utterly addicted to them and absolutely loved them. And some of them are absolutely packed full of sugar. So, you know, I don't mean to sound like a nanny, but I do think there maybe is a case for it. But there is a massive glaring inconsistency here, evident, where they are saying that under 16s, they recognise, like I do, that actually maybe the state needs to act so that they're not plying themselves full of sugar, rotting their teeth, and having all this caffeine for them, sending them utterly doolally during a class. But they're also saying 16-year-olds are old enough to buy, to actually vote in the next general election to decide the future direction of the country in a national vote of significant importance, but they're too immature to know that drinking all that sugar and having caffeine, like you wouldn't believe, like you're sort of, I don't know, dripped into a Colombian cafe farm, is actually bad for them, and they're too young and naive to know that, but they're old enough to vote. And I think it's gerrymandering, right? This is naked gerrymandering. Yep. They're fixing the election. But do you recognise that inconsistency there as well?
Yeah, I do, because it's essentially saying that the day you go from being 15 years old to 16 years old, you suddenly are adult enough to not be addicted to energy drinks and to vote for the future of this country. It's a complete juxtaposition of what their policy is. It's saying you're mature and old at 16 and you should be allowed to vote on the future of this country, on the prime minister, on the party that represents you. But also the day before that, you can't buy an energy drink without mum or dad's approval. It's utterly bonkers. It doesn't make any sense at all. Frankly, the Labour Party just constantly expose who they are through their own actions. And I think, this goes back to what we were saying earlier, this deep sort of rift in the Labour Party, where some of them are these sort of so far left that they'd have 12-year-olds voting if they could get them out there to the polling booths if it upped their numbers, frankly. But we know, Darren, I was a lefty at school, like most young people were, and it does take a bit of lived experience to actually understand what politics even means to you, before the age of 16. I mean, you can't work before the age of 16. Why would they expect a 16-year-old to be able to make a decision like that? It's bonkers. It's bonkers.
It is bonkers, but I think you're right. But we shouldn't be surprised on the 12-year-old point, because, many of them were saying that these kids are old enough to know that they're born into the wrong gender identity and to do all sorts of harm to their bodies. What are they going to do there? That's going to be the terrifying thing. So I would argue kids aren't safe at the Labour Party, and I know that's going to be very controversial, but I don't give a damn. I really do think that. So they can ban all the energy drinks they want, but it doesn't change the fact that they're willing to put ideology ahead of child safeguarding.
This is not Blair's Labour Party, and this is the lie they're trying to sell you. They want you at home to believe that he is the new Blair and that this is new Labour. That's what they think. They're trying to bring that back in your minds and believe, okay, we're the new Labour Party. They are not. They are much farther left than New Labour ever was. There is not even a comparison between the two parties, and you're going to see that played out over the next 5 to 10 years when we see the true Labour Party come out. I mean, just today they were saying, I couldn't believe it today, Darren. You must have seen the poster as well. They put the poster up going, "Labour's here. Labour backs drivers."
Yeah, I did.
You've got to be effing kidding me. Labour Party backs drivers. This is the party of Younes, of congestion charges. I could sit here all day of 20 miles per hour. They have completely destroyed London for drivers. They've destroyed Wales for drivers. And now watch what they do to the rest of the country. You'll be driving up the M4 at 10 miles an hour before you bloody know it.
Yeah. Yeah. 80 says, Blair, it's not the party of Blair, but Blair's telling them what to say.
Yeah, well, of course. PR. It's PR, yeah.
And Chris was talking about Wurzel Gummidge, I think, who I do know who that is, but I can't say I've ever seen it. And Joe reminds us that Annalise Dodds, who's the chairman of the Labour Party, said, will I get cancelled for saying chairman? Chairwoman? I don't know what you meant to say these days. Chairperson. Hair poodle, because she's got quite poodly hair.
Poodle,
and she says Annalise Dodds is still ignoring the Cass review, which was, of course, the independent review by Dame Hilary Cass, who, for saying that children haven't been safeguarded through trans ideology, which, of course, the Labour Party support, that she's having to have security and she can't go on public transport and all these other things. So, yeah, they won't accept that. We're in for a bloody rough ride for the next 5 years. But as I said earlier, I think it's all going to fall apart. The honeymoon period will be very short indeed. Very, very short. And on that note, I think we're going to have to say adieu and saunter off. with a 2-man band. I can't believe Younes left us so abruptly. I thought you might give us another 5 minutes, Alex, but never mind.
Never mind.
What can I say? But Alex, you've been a peach and you've stayed on the full shebang, so thank you very much. Thank you very much to the viewers, and especially those who are super chats on YouTube. Any support that you can give Reasoned, reasoned.uk is the website you need. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Every little really does help. And thank you very much for your company. As ever, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you. I wish I could do more of these streams because I think they're great value, actually, if I do so myself. That was very arrogant. But great value in getting lots of topics covered and being able to interact with you or people, which I love doing, as long as you don't throw a brick at us. And yes, thank you very much. Good night, everybody. And good night, Alex.
See you all.